Welcome everyone to the Jessica Wetz Show and the new series that I'm doing here with Amanda Dewal, the owner of Strength Counselling Services, called Convos with a Counsellor. And I'm really excited for everyone to see what conversations with a counselor can look like, because I know a lot of people have no idea. And I am a huge advocate for mental health, and obviously you are too. So thank you for being here, Amanda.
I am. I am. Well, thanks, Jessica, for having me and for doing this work for yourself,
Yeah,
right? And I'm delighted to do it with you.
Yes, I'm so appreciative because I've always wanted to, when I have conversations with mental health professionals, I always just go online and tell everybody what they said. And I always think to myself, it would probably be much more effective if people could just literally hear what they're saying in the moment, because I know a lot of things that apply to me apply to other people. And a lot of people are like apprehensive to see what an environment like this can look like.
Well, I'm excited for you putting yourself out there because there's so many people who are, like you said, apprehensive. They're so afraid
Yeah.
to even in private, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
counseling sessions are commonly all done in private, but people are so afraid to even step into that zone, knowing that it's only the two people,
Yeah.
the counselor and the client, and they're so afraid to even go there.
And
So this is really go
people
ahead.
picture it as like you lay on a couch and then they just say, "How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel?" And not just you say how you feel and then you ask a couple questions and next thing you know, I have a whole new perspective on it.
Right? Yeah, no, we swear here.
Yeah,
We like
fucking right we
we like
do.
we're gonna have times that are tough,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna have times that are funny, and we're just gonna be who we are, and we're
Yeah.
just gonna interact in that way. And I will give you my, everything I can from my training and experience and expertise,
Yeah.
and I'll throw things at you, and you decide what you keep and what you don't keep.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, back in the day when Freud was the all end all be all, people did lay on couches for sure, but this
Absolutely.
is so different now, especially considering it's all done digitally, which is such an incredible way of doing it because you can just do it from anywhere.
Totally. You're
And so
way
it's
more
really
comfortable.
freeing that way. Yeah.
And also, I don't miss appointments because that was a common issue when I was going to therapy in person. If I
Yeah.
need to go to therapy because I'm too depressed to get out of bed, well, then how the hell am I supposed to get in my car and drive to the therapy appointment? So now that I can
Mhm.
literally do sessions in bed, I'm like, well, I just pick up the phone when they call and say, why aren't you on the Zoom?
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, again, thanks for doing this with me for your own benefit, right? And I'm hoping that you do have benefit from the conversations that we have together. So whenever you're ready, we can just jump in.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
All right, all right. So last time we met, we went through your intake basically, and we created a bunch of goals for you through our tier process. And so I did explain those tiers last time. Tier one is commonly where we start, and there's no crisis in your life right now that
Yeah.
is imminent that we need to address for safety or survival. So we're skipping that one altogether, and we're going to tier two. Now, tier two is life balance, which you said you want to start with, right?
Yeah.
And so today, the impression that I had from last session is that you wanted to create the sub goals within that tier,
Mm-hmm. Can
like
can you
being
go
able
over
to go
to
ahead.
can you go over just for the viewer what those tiers are again? I know it was
Sure, yeah.
crisis.
So tier one is crisis and survival. Tier two is life balance, meaning anything from being able to brush your teeth at night or in the morning to getting to work on time, paying your bills, taking care of your kids. Getting out of bed is a hard one for a lot of people. Just
Mm-hmm.
anything that you need to maintain some sort of life balance that is sustaining or sustainable for that person.
Mm-hmm.
And anything can fall into that category depending on what the person's situation is in their life. And we'll break that open for you, and so people will be able to see what that looks like from your point of view and from your standard of living.
And then
And then tier three is go
trauma,
ahead.
right?
Tier three is relationships.
Okay, so I it's so interesting to me. I've never had someone like lay out the tiers to me before, And I know one of the tiers is trauma. And I feel like often in therapy, like that's the one that was really focused in on. So I'm excited to focus on those basic life skills, because a lot of times the approach was the other way around. Like if we deal with your trauma, then you'll be able to have those life skills. And I tried that for a real long time, but I'm excited to do it the other way around now, because I am self-aware. I know that's a big problem for a lot of people who are like really self-aware, is you come in and just explain like, this is why I do what I do. But my thing is I need to be able to change that and not just sit there and psychoanalyze it. So I'm excited to focus on that first step. But next step is relationships, or tier, I should say.
That's great. Great. Yeah. And I'll speak about trauma in a second. So relationships is tier 3, but that's not only relationships with the people around you, but more importantly, and most importantly, the relationship you have with yourself, how you, that little voice inside that talks to you a lot. Like we all have that little voice, and sometimes it's really mean to us. Sometimes it's kind to us. Most of the time it's not so kind to us. Sometimes it's indifferent to us. And that voice mimics the voice that the common voice that we were raised with, or voices that we were raised with. And we commonly tend to treat ourselves the way our primary caregivers treated us, unless we've worked through and healed some of that process. And the reason we do that is because we don't know how to do it differently. This is what we learned about survival through childhood, adolescence, early adulthood. And so this is the way that we engage with the world. And so working on that relationship with self and improving that voice and the way we treat ourselves is vitally important to healing the whole picture of the person. And then of course we also focus on relationships with others.
It's funny to picture that, because I'm so mean to myself, and then I'm so passive, and I think about that, and like that was my dad's voice, and then my mom's voice. It was like, be mean to yourself and then just be like, oh, just kidding, have a lollipop. So
right.
That is
and
interesting.
So we're probably in our conversations, we're probably going to do what we call some child work, and give a scope of that, because there is an inner, it's such a cliche because people say it all the time. Oh, inner child, but it's a real thing. There's a little, like, part of your soul is connected to this inner child inside of you. So when you are mean to yourself, you're being mean to that little one. And then it was interesting because you were like, oh, okay, just kidding, like, have a lollipop. And it's like, that's what sometimes our caregivers do to us. I'm gonna be mean to you for whatever reason, and then I'm gonna try and make it up to you by being nice in this moment or whatever. And it creates a very disorganized or anxious attachment,
and not even
for that child.
And not even just nice, but because I've always considered myself too nice to myself, because I'm like, brush your teeth, you fucking idiot. And then I'm like, okay, whatever, no, go to bed. And I always think, oh, I'm being too nice to myself by allowing myself not to brush my teeth. But that's not very nice at all. Now that I like really reflect on the fact that just by allowing myself to not do these things, that's not nice. Like, it's just passive. You know what I mean?
And it's enabling poor behavior for long-term consequences.
Yeah.
Right. So we're likely going to go in that direction with our conversations also. And
I think all my conversations go in that
part
direction.
of you. But helping that part of you to be able to trust the adult you, because it doesn't, right? Because if it did, then you would not actually be treating yourself terribly. There'd be a symbiosis that's happening that's not happening right now. So the tier 3 is really important. I mean, all the tiers are important in their own way, but so tier 2 we're going to focus a lot on, but we'll do a combination of tier 2 and tier 3 because we have to have those conversations with that little one and help that little one to be more aligned with doing things like brushing your teeth and adhering to your responsibilities, whatever those are. And so if the little one is on board, it's a hell of a lot easier to get things done and to be content in life, as opposed to when that inner child hates you. And I'm not saying yours does, but oftentimes the inner child hates us because we mistreat it all the time.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Right? And I really struggle with, like, I've been learning about pathological demand avoidance. And when I think about even like as basic skills as like, I have to go to the bathroom right now. Like, I struggle with that because I'm like, no, I'll just sit here and wait until it gets like really bad. And
So you're forced to do it.
yeah, and I really like imagine
Yeah.
a little kid. That's exactly what little kids do. Like, I don't want to leave the park, so I'm just peeing my pants.
Yeah.
And like
Hmm.
that little kid needs to have adult me guided in the right direction.
I like the way you said that. Yeah. Yeah. That little kid. And again, this might sound cliche for some people, but that little kid needs to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that wholeheartedly. It really does need to be loved because when kids misbehave, they are often just seeking attention, and any attention is better than no attention.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then it reinforces this cycle where we're mean to it because it's misbehaving or whatever. So we're going to create some context around that for you, for your life. And then tier 4 is trauma. Now, I like that you brought up that oftentimes in therapy, trauma is like this main focus. And then the idea is it's we're doing it backwards, but
Mm-hmm.
actually I think we're going to do it forwards, because the idea when you attend to trauma first is that then you'll be more functional in these basic things in life. And with all due respect for therapists out there who do that kind of work and do it in that direction, I disagree. I think that we need to focus on the basic skills
Mm-hmm.
that are not going well or that are causing the person's life to fall apart before we can address something that is so deep seated and disturbing and damaging to that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you and I were to jump into your trauma, the likelihood of me re-traumatizing you in that process is really high. And that's too dangerous. There's no chance that I would take
And
to possibly re-traumatize somebody.
then I'm still not brushing my teeth. like like I don't,
Right.
like I don't want to brush my teeth even more when I do that.
Right? Because people don't get better right away. They get worse and then they get better.
Mm-hmm.
And they get worse because they have to start facing,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to call them demons or problems or whatever, that they don't want to face. And so when a therapist says, hey, let's face these, even though we face them together, it's still really difficult. And
Yeah.
so going into trauma specifically is going to not only be difficult because we're facing the, issues with mom or issues with whoever, and we're facing all of that. It's difficult, but it's also damaging because the person is having to relive whatever it is that they have tried so hard to push down. So it's like a double barrel,
And
if you know what I mean.
it's
Right.
interesting your process too with like the relationship with yourself coming before the trauma, because a lot of times when I would look back on my trauma, I would hate on how I behaved. Like I would hate how I
Mm-hmm.
reacted through the trauma. So that is an interesting, if you work on your relationship with yourself and loving yourself before you reflect
Mm-hmm.
and think about those traumas, I think I would have a totally different like respect for even what had happened to me and the way I responded when I was younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I understand, Jessica, that you've gone through quite a bit of trauma therapy already. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, and perhaps you can educate me here, but I think that some of that probably was helpful to you
Mm-hmm.
in being able to process the relationship with your parents and
Mm-hmm.
the death of your dad and things like that, your upbringing and the harshness of your childhood. But I also wonder if some of that was damaging to you and re-traumatizing.
For sure. And a lot of it too
Yeah.
was just telling the same stories over and over and over because I wouldn't
Yeah.
get better. So they'd send me to someone else and they're like, okay, tell me what
Mm-hmm.
happened to you as a kid. And I'm like, because now I like, that's why I talk about all my trauma so publicly. I'm so desensitized to it. I've told these things 1,000 times. And again, like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people who are quote unquote self-aware, a therapist have said to me, well, like you kind of have it figured out. Like, you know exactly why you behave the way you do and how those traumas affected you today. And I would always be like, okay, yeah. But so how about we stop having that conversation and figure out how the fuck I can like pay my rent?
Exactly, exactly. And that's why last time we met last week, we didn't go there. And
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to go there. There
Mm-hmm.
might be some things that I will ask that's tailored to the relationship piece and the child work. But me knowing the story of your trauma is not really going to help me, and it's not going to help you,
But
considering how much you've gone through it.
I do like, because I have received all these chronic illness diagnoses, really, and I have been reflecting on the fact that like a lot of the mental illness I was diagnosed with was actually a physical problem that was ignored. I have been kind of getting re-traumatized by like those memories coming up, because it was a different perspective before. Like what I was told was not necessarily true. So I'm sure those things will come up, because with my chronic illness diagnosis, I like get these thoughts of when I was younger and stuff. But as far as just like my relationship with my parents and that childhood stuff, yeah, I'm excited to focus on more like basic life skills.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And then tier 5, just to finish off, is it's called the integration stage. Tier 5, to make it really simple, is really just about being your whole self that you want to be. And so some people, they walk through the world like a zombie, and they're just going day by day, and they don't know why they're doing it, and they don't know what the purpose is, and they don't care about it, and they just are what I would call a zombie or a sleeper. And they're just walking
Yeah,
through life
autopilot.
and on autopilot, right? And tier 5 is really all about connecting with the soul of the human and saying, like, what do you really want for your life? You know, if you're working in a dead end job that you hate, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to be an artist, or I want to be a singer, or I want to be a this or that, or whatever it is. I want to be a microbiologist. Okay, so have you taken any steps to get there? Well, no, I'm super depressed, and I hate getting out of bed, but I have to pay my bills, so I go to work, and I hate my life. And it's like, okay, so we have to work on the life balance stage to get to this place of wholeness in tier 5. But tier 5 comes after you've done all of that work from 1 to 4. And then you start that integration process of, if someone says, they come through 1 through 3, and they tier 1 through 3, and they say, oh, I'm doing so much better. Like, thanks for your help. Peace out. They don't do the trauma work. Well, it's going to be really hard to get to the full integration stage of being that soulful human that's perfectly who you are meant to be, or who you want to be. And if you haven't done that, so commonly we see people, they'll do up to 3, and then they'll leave, and then they'll come back 2 years later, and they'll say, oh, everything's fallen apart because I really have to focus on this trauma now, and I'm not managing well. And so if someone does 1 through 4 and gets into 5, the success rate for soulful integration is incredible. Like, I can't even start to explain how successful it is. And that's a big reason why we have created the tiers as we have, because they work.
And
right?
I also
So
think it's a good point,
that's how that
because
works.
a lot of people think that you have to do therapy and for the rest of your life, and that it's just something that like you have to go back to. And that is true for some people. But like you said, you have a whole plan from front to back here. So I think that's really exciting too, that some people can feel like, okay, well, here's a timeline, especially because therapy is expensive. So if people are going into it thinking like this is like a never ending thing, or that there's not like you have a step and plans to get you to the other side, I think it's easier to justify the investment in your mental health when you have a plan. Because oftentimes, like I said, I go into a therapist, I'm just talking about my trauma for an hour, and then it's like, okay, here's $220 or whatever, and then I'm like, yeah, damn, like I could do that forever.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really good point. We don't want people to stay in therapy forever. We want you to progress and grow out of it, basically. And so some people, they do stick around for a long, long time, and maybe they need to do that, and that's okay. And some people, they stick around for a really short period of time, and they need to do that, and that's okay. But somewhere in the middle is really valuable. And this is why, so when we create a tier system with somebody, I don't care if they stay with us or they go somewhere else, they have this roadmap of what they can be doing. And so we start with you, we're going to start at tier 2. And then if you actually, and here's the challenge, if you actually do the work, which I have no doubt that some days you want to do and some
Mm-hmm.
days you won't want to do. But if you do the work and you progress through tier 2 into tier 3, and you start to habituate these patterns,
Mm-hmm.
these healthy patterns that we're hopefully going to create, you won't fall back into tier 2 unless, of course, something traumatic happens in your life or you become really depressed, and then it's really easy to fall back into where you were.
Mm-hmm.
But therapy can be really helpful to hold the fire to you, or hold you accountable, help you to hold yourself accountable to surpass tier 2. And then once you created those habits, guess what? You don't have to do tier 2 ever again,
Yeah.
and
Nice.
barring, something traumatic happening. And then same with tier 3. This isn't about fixing a specific issue. This is about a core problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like your defiance.
Mm-hmm.
So we're wanting to, so you start brushing your teeth. It's like, okay, great. Now you're brushing your teeth. But if you still have that core oppositional defiance to something I'm asking you to do, or you're asking yourself to do,
Mm-hmm.
well, we haven't actually done anything successful.
Yeah, because that can
You know what I'm
manifest in a
saying?
billion ways.
That's right. Exactly. So we actually have to heal the core problem that is affecting your life balance. And once we've done that, guess what? We move on. And now you're working on relationships in whatever way you want to work on them, whatever way you want your life to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the trauma stage for you, you may actually not need to do any of that with me because you beat it to death doing it with everyone else that you've done it with. Now, but that's not, I'm not saying that's absolute, because
Mm-hmm.
there are aspects of your trauma that show up in your relationships. And so we will address those,
Aspects.
but it doesn't,
I think my
right? But
relationships
it
just are trauma responses.
could be. But we're not going, it's not about the story of the trauma anymore. It's about your
Yeah.
behavior and where you want to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
So, so that's how it's going to work. And we're going to really look at the core of what it is that's
Mm-hmm.
causing you not to want to brush your teeth, or not to want to get out of bed, or not want to do whatever, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
connected to something. And I think we may have touched on it in our last session, about that child defiance piece.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also intrusive thoughts in there, and we might talk a little bit about that too. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so we're going to look at the core and not just the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the first thing I want to do then is I want to take a look at the theme. So I want to know all the things that you do that fall into this category of not wanting to, or being defiant against, right? So we have the brushing of the teeth, which is the main one that we've talked about. And I'm going to write these down as we talk. But what else? Just tell me about a day in the life of Jessica,
I'm
and we'll go from there.
I I'm telling you everything. Like even just the way that things are phrased. If we phrase them in a way that it doesn't, like, if anybody was like, you should do this, it doesn't matter what they're saying. I'm like, no. But if they're like, oh, I did this and it was helpful, maybe you should try it. But waking up in the morning, not brushing my teeth, not eating breakfast, not showering, just scrolling on my phone, like not answering emails, not answering texts, like I just live in this state of like, I don't want to do anything, and then I won't do it until I really have to do it. So like I'm so hungry that I'm feeling sick, or like I need to go and do something.
Okay. All right. Everything.
So but
So I
really,
hear you say it's everything,
mm-hmm.
but we have to be careful about all or nothing, right? And although that may
Mm-hmm.
be true, I just want to explore that a little bit. Is there anything that you want to do, right? Like your social media channel, like managing that or posting on that. I mean, this is something that you do a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is that something that you want to do? Like
Yeah.
is this really
That's
everything
no,
that
yeah, you're
falls
right.
into this pathological demand avoidance?
Well, it depends on how I frame it. Like if I have to make a video about something, like say a brand has sent me something and I need to make a video about it, I can't, like I struggle so much to do it. But if I'm just talking about whatever I want to talk about, yeah, but that's like, that's also just me, like that's my social outlet. That's me getting the ideas out of my head and like putting them out there and communicating with other people. So I have no problem doing that. So you're right. That is, I am a
Right. Okay.
all or nothing all the time.
Okay. So what you've just told me then, just to be fair, so we understand each other, is that it's not everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's most things, but I would say anything where you are demanding of yourself or someone
Mm-hmm.
is demanding of you. And demand is a strong word, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the name of this
Yeah.
condition that we're talking about, is pathological demand avoidance. But it could be as simple as someone hiring you and asking you to do something, or
Mm-hmm.
someone making a suggestion and
Mm-hmm.
it's the same reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what you've just described when you want to do it is something that I understand that's called flow. There's actually a book called Flow that I would so recommend everybody
Oh, really?
read. And this flow is really a state of being, I don't explain it as well as the writer explains it, but it's a state of being like literally in flow where you don't have to care about what you're doing.
Mm.
You just love what you're doing. It's
Yeah.
like the rock climber who just is
You're in the
enthralled in
zone.
rock climbing. You're in the zone.
Yeah.
Okay, so think about the times where you feel most in flow and explain that to me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I definitely get lost in things where research and making videos. But sometimes I wonder too if I'm just like caught in a loop because sometimes my flow is like filming a 60-second video and then not liking how I said it and then just redoing it over and over and over. So I can get caught in loops too. But
Mhm.
yeah, research and um, making videos is definitely something that I get lost in.
Okay.
And I'm like excited when I'm doing it and then I'm like, "Oh my god,
Yeah, exactly.
8 hours have passed."
Yeah. So being in flow is super beautiful and super lovely for people. And we can't always be in flow, but so here's an example of a suggestion I'm going to make, and you'll take it or leave it based on what we're just talking about. But I would love for you to notice, maybe not notice, but embrace
Mm-hmm.
more so when you are in flow in those moments. Because when we are pathologically def- defiant against something, that doesn't actually help our dopamine levels, our serotonin levels.
Mm-hmm.
It actually causes feelings that are contrary, right? Because we're not happy when we say, fucking brush your teeth. We're not feeling happy about that. We're having to push away and we
Mm-hmm.
have resistance against something. And so the more that we're in resistance, the less happy we're going to feel. Now, the more in flow we are, the more happy we're going to feel. But we have to be careful. And this is something that you've mentioned too. We have to be careful with addiction because flow is not, like addiction is not flow, right?
Mm.
Flow is this genuine place of heart and soul when we love what we're doing and it's not hurting us. And then
Mm.
some people say, well, I will just keep on doing that over and over, but then it becomes addictive. So when
Yeah.
you said, well, I really like researching, you also mentioned that you're addicted to researching and it becomes, I don't know about harmful, but it
Oh
wastes a
yeah.
ton of your time because you're doing way too much of it,
Yeah.
right? It's all or nothing, right? So the piece around flow that I want you to focus on, or that I encourage you to focus on, is being able to embrace it fully in that moment when it's happening. And so if demand avoidance shows up around the time that you were in flow, the idea is that we want to recalibrate to flow.
Mm.
It's about a mindset change rather
That
than being resistant or being embracing the isness of the moment.
that's
Make sense?
interesting because when I am in flow, I feel so guilty about it. And I'm like, I shouldn't be fucking
Okay.
doing this. Like, you should be doing something more productive. Why are you just doing things that you enjoy?
Okay.
But that's interesting to think about. If I am doing something I'm enjoying, I should actually enjoy it so that I get the happy
Right.
brain chemicals than just being mad at myself for doing it.
Right. And that's part of where we're going to work on that child self.
Hmm.
Because why, tell me, why you don't deserve to be happy, or tell me why don't you deserve to enjoy your life. Go.
It's not that I don't deserve to, it's that that's the only thing I do. And I need to be like doing stuff I don't want to do. Like, I feel like I'm always just trying to do things
Okay.
that make me happy and not stressed and unchallenged. So I feel guilty because I'm like, I should, I can't just do this. I can't just be in flow 24/7, like you said. I'm like, I need to get out of flow and challenge myself a little. Do some things that I don't want to do,
Okay.
like my taxes.
So when you're being avoidant of a task, then we can maybe just let me think about how to reframe this. Do you feel guilty when you're avoiding something that you know you need to do?
It eats my soul alive every day.
Okay. 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 So I laugh because what you're telling me is you're so guilty, feeling
So
guilty
guilty.
because you don't do X, Y, and Z, but you're also feeling guilty when you do something you enjoy.
Yeah.
So you're feeling guilty all the fucking time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that doesn't compute for me around
Yeah.
helping to improve your dopamine levels and like
Mhm.
embrace your life and embrace what's in front of you,
Mhm.
right? You seem to be, and tell me if I'm wrong, but you seem to be in a constant state of like wanting to change
Yeah.
what your present moment is,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
right? And so when you're feeling guilty, what is that inner voice saying that will happen if you do or don't do the thing that you're feeling guilty about? Like, what's the end goal of feeling guilty? Because you're in this black hole that's cycling, just feeling guilty
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
So, what's the goal of feeling guilty, or what's the outcome going to be?
It's bad. Yeah. It I
What does that mean?
Well, I've just always pictured that inevitably I will be homeless on the streets on heroin because I can't just like do nothing forever. Like, if I'm just stuck forever,
Okay.
eventually everything around me is gonna.
So, it's fear is driving the guilt.
Yeah. Fear, but also
Okay.
like, fuck you, you're such a lazy piece of shit. Like, hatred.
Self hatred.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. How does anxiety fit into all of this for you in a day in the life with Jessica?
Well, I guess that the like that feels like anxiety, like that guilt and that hatred of being like, oh, I need to do my taxes. I need to do my taxes. Watches videos for 1 hour. Oh fuck, I need to do my taxes. I need to do my tax.
Mm-hmm.
Da, 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 da.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
just like
Okay.
anytime I have something to do, I'm like, but I'm also like have this perfectionist component where I'm like, it feels like I can never approach a task because in my head it's like way bigger than it actually is.
Mm-hmm. You know, people often have said, and I'm not sure how I feel about this at this moment, especially in regards to your situation, but people have said that when we know we have to do something and we purposely put it off and put it off and procrastinate, it's because we have this fear of being successful. Do you think that's true for you?
A fear of being successful. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I can never be success. I don't think it's like it's a fear that I'm gonna do it wrong, so why bother? Like, I'm not gonna do it good enough, so I don't want to
Okay.
try in the first place.
So let's twist this then.
Mm-hmm.
Anything I say that's not correct, just tell me. But this is my impression.
Mm-hmm.
Your identity seems wrapped up in not being productive,
Mm-hmm.
not being successful,
Yeah.
not being good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what you know about how to survive in the world is anxiety, guilt, shame, and self-hatred. This is how you operate in your life. Is that correct?
Yeah. Bang
Commonly?
on. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So in essence, if you were to turn that around and you were to not hate yourself,
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're going to be working on. You don't just imagine a future where you don't hate yourself, you don't put yourself down, you brush your teeth regularly,
Yeah.
and you don't push away the things that you know need to get done, and you do them because you can do them. This is something you mentioned to me before. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
wondering, how would you feel about yourself if you didn't have these four things that I've just mentioned?
I would be invincible. I'd be the best person on earth. And I like part of me like sees like if only I did XYZ, I would be a millionaire. I would be so like I would be able to help so many people. Da, da, da. So I part of me does like imagine that. It just feels like it's unattainable.
Just wonder though if there's some part of your psyche that's saying that's too scary to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I definitely do feel that because when I feel the anxiety of like even like I second shoot my friend's a wedding photographer and I second shoot for her and it just gives me so much
Okay.
anxiety and oftentimes I don't want to go because I just well, I guess I'm going back to the like I feel like I'm doing it wrong and even when I'm very successful at it and she's telling me that, I'm like no, it's bad. Like so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess I'd have to think more about fear of being successful.
Mm-hmm. I think there's room for us to really explore that
Yeah.
because if this is how you know how to survive in the world,
Mhm.
then changing all of this to
Mm.
ideally survive in the world in a much healthier way is
Mhm.
so scary that we sabotage it.
Mm.
So we don't do it because we don't actually know how to survive in the world that way,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
This is really similar to what we call, well, a lot of people refer to it as the battered wife syndrome, but I call it the battered partner syndrome, right? Because either partner can be abusive toward the other partner or both. So you say you have one partner in a duo or a trio or a quad, whatever, and that one person A, let's say, is highly abused in that relationship. Let's just say for simplicity by person B. So person B is abusing person A, and person A goes, I need to get out of here. I need to change this. And then they might try and change it. Maybe they'll go to a shelter for a night and then they end up right back where they started.
Mhm.
If they're lucky, maybe they do actually get out of it for a period of time. And then the next partner they get is just like partner B,
Yeah.
and they're back into this abusive cycle.
Cuz it's
Now, the
comfortable.
reason this happens is because they are comfortable in uncomfortability. They
Mm.
know they need to change it, but they don't. And this is not even something people are commonly aware of.
Mm.
They don't know that they're sabotaging the change,
Yeah.
that they're choosing to stay because it's safer. Believe it or not, they're being abused in this situation and it's
Mhm.
way safer for
Predictable.
them because they know how to survive. It's predictable. They know how to heal the bruise. They know how to
Mhm. I
take
can
care of the kids in this situation. It's something really similar that I'm seeing in this pattern with you.
yeah, I definitely have like been in relationships or like have been doing things where I'm like this is really good and like it's not comfortable for me and it freaks me out and like I've definitely dated people where I'm like this is too good. I don't want to be here. I need the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
I'm bored.
Mm-hmm. And that, if I can venture to say, that is because of your trauma.
Mhm. Mhm.
You're
Totally.
you're bored when something is healthy
Mhm.
because it's you're not used to living in that way.
And I'm
And so
not
it
getting
comes
those
across as boredom.
and I'm not getting that adrenaline that like in my head love is when you get that really intense feeling inside you but
Mm,
I'm learning in actuality it's like a really content feeling, not like adrenaline rushes from like fighting and making up and fighting and making up.
yeah. And that's addiction.
Mhm.
That would
Totally.
be a relationship or love addiction, right? That you keep going back into that. So when we look at the foundation of everything that we're talking about here, it's that you seem to be purposely sabotaging this possibility of being successful.
Mm.
And when I say successful, everyone's definition of successful
Yeah.
is different, but successful for you would be, like you said, like maybe being able to help a whole bunch of people. Maybe you would be a millionaire. Maybe you would have clean teeth,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? Like we can
Yeah.
go back to these tiny little successes, but the psyche attaches onto this is who Jessica is, and this is how Jessica knows how to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to sabotage these efforts over here because I actually don't want to be vulnerable and put myself out there to possibly fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Okay. So if we understand that foundation, where we want to begin is to start to recognize that there is safety over here because that little kid inside of you doesn't think there's safety over here.
Mm.
That little kid is surviving in the world that you are creating for her. Right? So everything that is going to mean that you will be more successful at some point, you'll sabotage because you're used to being here and you're comfortable being here. So we actually have to break that cycle, that
Mm-hmm.
pattern, in order for you to be okay with brushing your teeth or be okay with doing your taxes or okay with writing that email back,
Mm-hmm.
where it's not something that you, how do I say it? It's not the attitude is not something you have to do. It's something you want to do.
Yeah. Or even
Right.
or even it's just something I do. Like I'd love to like not attach any like, you know what I mean? I'd love
Yeah,
to just
that would be
wake up and
great.
I just shower, brush my teeth, eat food, and then I open my computer. And it's
Right.
not like a
I love
whole.
that too. Yeah, I love that. And I commonly work from a place called non-duality or transpersonal psychology.
Mm.
And in non-duality, I think we're going to use some of this with you, is it's really all about like just being with what is
Mm.
at all times, right? Now, we have emotions and we're going to be angry, sad, happy, whatever. But in that moment, we're just with it,
Yeah.
right? We don't need to change it. We're just like, even if we don't like it, it's about not attaching some kind of definition or judgment to it. It just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I love what you just said because you're taking the judgment away from good or bad. There is
Yeah.
no such thing. There just is what's happening right now. And the reality is that the way you're living your life right now is actually okay. That's non-duality. It's like you are the universe in this space. It's okay that you're living that way.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone comes and tells you it's not okay, that's maybe their experience, but it doesn't mean it's not okay for you. Now, the reason that we're having this conversation is because you've determined that it's not sustainable
Mm-hmm.
long term,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's okay, and we don't have to apply judgment to it, but
That
longer term, you want a different reality for yourself.
that was an interesting way to like take judgment away in my head, even because in my head I always go to the homeless on heroin, and you just used the word unsustainable. That's a better way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah,
This is
and
unsustainable, not I'm gonna be on the streets.
exactly. And this is the thing too, is like you have this like self-hatred cycle that's just going on and on and on. And the way that you are living your life now is not going to be helpful or healthy for you 10 years from now
Mm-hmm.
or 5 years from now or whatever, right? But yes, unsustainable. The all or nothing, this is something we can work on. I'm not gonna say we have to, something we can work on. So before we even go there, something that you said last time we met was, I can do it. Instead of saying I have to do it, I
Mm-hmm.
can do it. And I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about where you tell yourself that and how that shows up in a day in your life?
Well, for example, I crashed my car 6 months ago and I haven't bought a car
Mm-hmm.
yet because I have to buy a car because I need to buy a car and then I don't buy a car.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to reframe that as I get to buy a car and I can buy the car because I have the money, which is like kind of shifts it in my mind as this like dreadful task to like, oh wow, like for a lot of people, having the money to be able to buy a car is a super exciting, amazing thing. So I'm like, wow, I get to do that.
Hmm. So what stopped you from buying a car with that viewpoint?
It's not perfect. I have to settle.
Hmm.
And it's really hard for me to make decisions because of that. It's going to be the wrong decision because it's not perfect.
Okay. So life is a series of like step ups and step downs. And if you step up, one step and then you fall down 6 steps, so you're 5 steps down, and then you're going to get up and you're going to say, well, I just learned how not to fall 6 steps, right? So the idea is in that learning process, you can step up that 5 more steps and not fall 6 down. Maybe you'll fall 2 down, but it doesn't matter. The point is you're still ahead, right? And so if you make a decision and it's not perfect, that's actually great because it's going to come with learning. And when we think about the non-dual aspect of it, it just is what it is. And there actually is no such thing. And a lot of people are going to disagree with me here, and that's okay. But there's actually no such thing as perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like something that's perfect to you is not going to be perfect to me, and my perfect is not going to be your perfect. So perfect is subjective. There's no such thing as an absolute.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe in science there might be, or maybe in mathematics there might be, but an absolute perfect,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a viewpoint. And so at that core, that base of what we were talking about earlier, we actually need to lift the judgments and lift this perception of perfection.
Yeah.
Because anything that is less than perfect is actually fucking great because it's going to teach you something.
Ooh.
Right? I don't want you to be perfect. I want you to be learned. And then as you learn more, your life is going to get better. And then 5 years from now, you'll be like, holy shit, my life is perfect compared to where it was 5 years ago. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I want to throw up.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Just the thought of like, okay, how do I execute that? Like, how do I, and I know that I just find the car on Facebook and then I drive there and then I call my bank and then I get the car and then I get in the car. But I just have this like, I feel like paralyzed that I'm like, so I don't know how to I don't know,
Like nail it. Yeah.
seal the deal.
Yeah. And it's that fear. Okay. Now, it's interesting because on one hand, you tell me that you love the drama and you love the chaos and you like live in this place of like
Mm-hmm.
utter angst a lot of the time. And then over here, you're like, this is what I have to do to get the car, but I'm so scared. And it's
Yeah.
like, what's the difference?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah. You mean that I'm not just like impulsive with it?
No, I mean, like you actually enjoy living in this place of angst and relationship conflict, and then there's like an addictive aspect to
Well,
that, right?
then
and
could
then
I be
and
doing
then you
that
have this.
with the car
Go ahead.
that I'm just like for 6 months and I don't have a car. I'm stressed about a car. Like I've like made a problem for myself.
It could be, but there's a few aspects that we can ways that we can look at this. So yes, you could be playing into this place where you're like, oh, I'm so scared and I love living in this chaos, so I'm just going to stay living in this chaos. If I buy a car, I won't have the chaos anymore. So I've lost that. That's one aspect. The other aspect, though, that's really interesting to me is that when you're in a relationship with somebody and you're fighting and then getting back together and fighting and getting back together, it's kind of like when you think about this car piece, you're not afraid to fight and fall out of a relationship. So why are you afraid to follow through with the car piece? Is it because you're attached to the chaos of all the research and it not being perfect?
Mhm.
I don't know.
I don't know either. But that is interesting that I'm
Mhm.
just always in this cycle of, cuz I guess my fear is I'm in a, I don't know, I just can't like I almost bought a car, like I was like the paper was I was about to sign, I'd
Mhm.
already done every single step. But then I'm like,
Mhm.
because I also have that feeling of that shitty feeling inside, I go like something feels off here. I got to think this through
Okay.
more. In my
Okay.
gut, I feel something's off. It's like, well, no shit. You always feel like that. It has nothing to do with that decision. But I guess,
Mhm.
and
But
it's
it's
also a hatred thing of me being like, if I want to make this decision, it's probably the wrong one because I'm stupid.
yeah. Yeah. And so it's all tied into this bigger scheme that we've talked about you not being able to be successful because you're a piece of shit as a person.
Yeah.
That's what you tell yourself,
Yeah.
right? I'm not saying that to you.
No,
It's
I
that,
know.
right? I'm saying you think that about yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
so you couldn't possibly, you know, the psyche says you couldn't possibly make a good decision
Yeah.
because you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And okay, so what we need to do is we need to prove that voice wrong, right? This isn't even about child work. This is just about basic human
I think
decency
like
towards
that's a
yourself.
huge factor because that really like makes me go, fuck, okay.
Okay, so tell me what happened right there.
I guess I'm just thinking like, okay, what are examples of times that you've made decisions and it's like, I just thought like, oh, I've bought a car before. Like
Mm-hmm.
I, I've bought, I can, I have bought things before, so I guess that's not really true. I've made decisions and it was like a good decision
Mm-hmm.
because I researched the
What do
hell out
you,
of it.
okay.
So I
What do
have
you think the
this,
emotions are about?
I don't know, it's just like the self-esteem of like, I hate myself and you suck. And then being like, well, that's
Mm-hmm.
not really actually true. That just makes me emotional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so when you constantly make decisions that make your life harder or worse, you reinforce that voice because the voice says, you can't do it. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. And you always fail.
Yeah, that doesn't make me
Then
cry. But thinking about
you,
like you can do things, that makes me like upset. So that is very interesting.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So you sit in this comfortable, and I put it in quotes because you're actually not comfortable. You
Yeah.
don't like the situation that you're in. You're not comfortable, but you're comfortable being uncomfortable because
Mhm.
that's how you know how to survive. So we go back to that main scope of it's too scary to become successful,
Mhm.
right? So this is where we can
I do
use
I do see the vulnerability in that now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. This is where we can use some exposure therapy if you were interested in that
Mhm.
because constantly multiple times a day, maybe hundreds of times a day, you reinforce that voice
Mhm.
and you say, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to do this and this and this. Yeah, you're right. And instead, I'll research so I can show you that the research is right. And this isn't about me being right or making this decision. The research will tell me what decision to make.
Yeah. Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So then you don't have to take responsibility
Yeah.
for making the decision because the research clearly showed you what you should do.
Yeah.
The, the problem with that, though, and this is why you go down this wormhole of research for hours and hours at a time, is because there is no answer,
Mhm. Mhm. I just
right?
have to
The
decide
research is,
with the information provided.
right? There's just a bunch of information and you have to still make a decision. But the research is like, okay, so I'm gonna get okay, I'm gonna compare these two models of cars. It's all going to be opinion based.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, maybe the suspension system in car A is better than car B. But then the opinion is the suspension system that important? Right. And
Mhm.
person A is going to be like, yeah, it's super important. I'm going around corners. And person B is going to be like, well, the size of the tires is going to be more important around going around corners or whatever. So at the end of the day, the research, these wormholes of research that you're doing, it's actually not helping you at all, would you say?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's really interesting because I don't feel confident in my decision. So I just feel like if I gather enough information, the information will make the
Mm-hmm.
right decision, but it's actually just not a confidence in like my ability to,
Right. Right.
yeah.
And it's been 6 months of researching cars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So where the exposure therapy comes in, we can always do this together, or uh, you can outline it to do it yourself. But it means biting into a decision and doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, regardless of the outcome of the decision, it doesn't actually matter because the idea behind making the decision is A, you'll have a car. That's cool. B, you'll learn something about the process of buying a car.
Well,
Without, I mean,
I know
you've learned a
everything
lot,
about
but
buying cars.
you've not executed it though.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't learned something from the execution of
Mm-hmm.
that because you're
Mm-hmm.
so stuck in your fear,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that voice inside is so horrible to you that we need to turn around. It's like in our nightmares, we turn around. They say, if you can turn around in your nightmare and confront your demon, then you'll find peace. You'll find confidence. You have to turn around and you have to show that voice that it's not right.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, every day, hundreds of times a day, you reinforce that the voice is right. So how can it possibly be wrong if you
Mm-hmm.
reinforce it's right so much?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like I use this kind of example with people a lot. It's like, say you have an empty pool and you, every single time you put yourself down or reinforce that self-hatred, that voice is right, you throw a dime into the pool. Well, it actually, hundreds of dimes a day, that pool's going to fill up at a certain rate, right? Now imagine taking out a dime every time that you do not reinforce that voice is right. Can you imagine how long that's going to take? How many layers of self-hatred you have paved on top of layers of self-hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And now we need to start stripping them away. We need to take the dimes out of the pool. We want that pool to be empty again.
Damn.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, there's interesting ways to do this. We're obviously not going to fill a pool of dimes like you would be a millionaire.
Holy shit, would I?
Some people, and I'll just put it out there, and you decide if it's something that could be useful or helpful or not. Because your executive functioning is really strong. It's your core of self lack of self love or self hatred that's stronger, right? So executively, you can
Mm.
say, "Oh, I need to do my taxes," but then the core goes, "Oh, well, you're a POS, so you'll never be able to do that right," or whatever it is, whatever the voice is saying at that time.
That makes
Some
me
people, they actually
that
go
makes
ahead.
me emotional because I tell myself that I don't have the executive function skills. You telling me I do have the executive function skills, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, you do. I've seen no disability in your executive function from the day I met you long, long time ago, right? What I see is an inability to regulate that internal voice or how you feel about yourself,
Yeah, that
right?
self-esteem
Emotionally,
component. Uh-huh.
right? Yeah, yeah. So some people, they get a jar, and you can get a jar like super cheap. And this is for anybody who's listening. This could be really helpful. Get a jar from the dollar store, get some tokens of some kind, and every time you can get 2 jars and test it out. Every time you're mean to yourself, you put a token in a certain color, where you can, however you want to do it. And every time you're nice to yourself, you put a token in a different jar, and you
Mm.
can see the difference. Or you can do it, like I said, with the pool. You put tokens in when you're mean to yourself, and then you take them out when you're nice to yourself or whatever. But either way, you're going to be able to tell over a week's period of time or a day's period of time. Um, how horrible you're being to yourself and what healing you're doing. And then over time, so you can actually test it out. Week 1, this is, take a picture of the jars. Week 52, this is where I'm at, and this is how healthy I am now. And you can actually see your growth over time.
When
I
you
don't know if you're
say
interested in that, but I'll just put it on the table.
when you say when you're nice to yourself, put a token in the jar, I don't even know what that means because I've always considered being nice to myself as like, fine, you can binge eat, fine, you can smoke the drugs,
Yeah.
fine, you can like
And
giving
that's a
in.
neglectful parent.
Yeah.
That's just a and you're if you've ever seen those shows like uh there's a show called My 600-Pound Life.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever seen it on in HGTV.
Mhm.
And those people like like when they were younger, if you look back at their history, and sometimes you can learn about their history and sometimes you can't, but they often had people who enabled them.
Mhm.
There was one show that I watched, and I can't remember if it was that one or something similar to that one, but the mom was bringing donuts for the child, and the child was heavily overweight and was like 20 or something like that. And the mom, and this was all on camera, and the mom would bring 12 donuts, and the so I guess it wasn't a child anymore, but this adult child of the mother would eat them all in one sitting. And when asked why she did that, knowing it was harming her child, she said, because I don't want him to hate me.
Mm.
I want him to love me. So I'm going to say these things are okay, and I'm going to promote what's happening here, even though I don't want to promote it. But my desire to be loved
Mhm.
is greater than my desire to say no to my child.
Mhm.
And that's what you're doing to
Mm.
yourself.
Mm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So what is actually, let's just think about this, and then I'll give you some things to think about doing if you want. I'm not going to ask you to do anything. I'm not going to give you any homework. I'm just going to put some things on the table, and you decide if you want to do them or not, which might be hard because of the decision issue, but we're going to slowly work our way through that. And then we'll go to close today. But um oh, I just lost what I was going to ask you.
We
I'm
were
just going back in my thoughts. So this is what you're doing to yourself is,
So
you're
what does it mean to be
you're
nice
saying
to
these things are
myself?
okay. Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
what
but
would I be
there's
putting
also
coins in for?
yeah, okay. So there's that, but I'm also wondering what it would mean to be a good parent
Mm.
to yourself,
Oh.
right? But
Mm.
if you're saying, "Oh, it's okay to binge eat or it's okay to do this."
Mhm.
In non-duality, it is totally okay to do that. It's not sustainable,
Mhm.
right? And you want it to look different. So we want to say, how do we be a good parent? And then
Well,
we'll ask the question of how can you be kind to yourself to get a token? How can you be a good parent?
I'm encouraging myself to brush my teeth, go for a walk, eat dinner. Like I guess being nice to myself would be taking care of myself.
Right. So there's two levels here. There's the level of like you can be a good parent and you can be mean in
Mhm.
being a good parent, right?
True.
You can say, okay, brush your teeth so you don't have this consequence in the future or whatever. But the way I'm telling you to brush your teeth is not kind,
Mhm.
right? And I think this is the way you talk to yourself a lot.
Mhm.
So we can be a good parent and we can also then be kind and say, for example, well, I don't want to fucking brush my teeth. And so we can sit down and say, here's the reason for the motivation of brushing your teeth. Here are the consequences if you don't brush your teeth. We play the tape forward and we sit down with ourselves and we play it forward. So when I work with eating disorder clients, and they're like, I want to have a binge or I want to have a purge or whatever it is, I say, okay, sit down at your kitchen table for 15 minutes. You can across the board, you can do this with any decision making process. Sit down for 15 minutes, have a conversation with yourself about why you want to do that,
Mm.
but why you don't want to brush your teeth, why you don't want to answer that email, why you don't want to eat healthy or not eat dinner or whatever it is. Like Let's understand why. And it's like, well, I just don't feel like it. Okay, but why don't you feel like it? Like, what is the core of all of this is really what we want to focus on. And after 15 minutes, if you play the tape forward and you say to yourself in that time, you say, if I do this, X, Y, and Z are most likely to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I binge eat, for example, if I binge eat, I am likely going to feel like hell afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to put on some weight. My confidence is going to be even lower than it was the day before. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
reinforce that voice, like all these things. If I don't binge eat, what could happen? Well, I don't
Mm-hmm.
get my high. Okay, you don't get your high, so you're combating addiction. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
And then what else? What else? Well, I'm probably going to feel okay because I didn't binge.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put on that weight. So the point is, you sit down, you have a conversation on both sides with that self,
Mm-hmm.
and then you make a decision after 15 minutes. If you still decide that you're going to binge eat, you're choosing addiction. If you decide you're not going to binge eat, you're choosing health. And
Mm-hmm.
that's that toward the way to success. But your block to becoming successful, as we've talked about, is your confidence and your vulnerability levels. So to decide not to binge eat means that you have to be vulnerable in your emotions and reject that drive towards addiction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you think about what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's really interesting because if I were to sit and think about if I don't eat this entire bag of Nerds gummy clusters right now, like what are going to be the positives? And if I just think about the fact that like I'm not going to my belly's not going to hurt. I'm not going to be constantly talking shit to myself about and feeling guilty about it. Like it's interesting to think like if if I don't do this right now, I'm going to feel so good. Like long-term
Mm-hmm.
gratification, whereas if I cave right now, it's going to be fun for a minute, but then I'm going to feel like shit. So I think that is an interesting. I was even just thinking about it right now because my vape's right here. And I'm like, well, if I don't do that, I by the end of the day I'd be like, "Oh, okay. Like look at you go." Which would be a better feeling than being stoned all day. So I think that's an interesting. I think that would be helpful for me rather than thinking like marinating in the like if you don't do this right now these are all the consequences because I kind of think about that all the time, but if I think about the benefits and like think of because that almost makes me feel like gives me that positive like endorphin dopamine release just by thinking like if I were to not do the bad thing that would feel good.
And then this brings me full circle back to the flow state.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you pick up that vape and you're stoned all day, that's not flow. That's arguably, and tell me if I'm wrong, but that's addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're in flow, we're healthfully, if that's a word, we're in full health and doing something that we love. And then so making a determination not to do the thing toward addiction and towards lower self-confidence, and then to immediately do something in flow instead.
Mm.
What's going to happen is you're going to reinforce immediately your decision to choose something healthy,
Ooh, let's Pavlov's dog this.
right?
Yeah.
This is really valuable stuff if you tried it. And then the more that you do that, the less likely that you will, or the less number of times a day, you will feel the need to binge eat or be high or whatever, right?
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
But you have to reinforce the decision process. But when we're vulnerable and we're too scared, like this buying a car process, and we don't execute it, we can't come full circle. We can't reinforce the decision because the decision has not been made
Mm-hmm.
for success. The decision has been made for lack of success. And when I'm talking about the car, I mean you're deciding not to buy the car, which reinforces that you're a piece of shit as a human,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm going to ask you to consider in the next week before we meet again to do everything you can to interrupt the reinforcement of that voice. So you asked earlier, what can I do that's nice to myself to get a token in the jar? Well, it could be something as simple as stopping the reinforcement.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Right?
that really, like, that makes me like cry. So I feel like that's like a good direction to go, because even just catching myself when I'm like talking shit to myself and being like, that's not true, like that makes me emotional. Like, it's, so I guess that is me being nice to
Do you
myself.
remember in our very, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, like being nice to myself makes me like, I would usually associate, like, I don't feel bad, but it is interesting how like it makes me emotional, like thinking or saying nice things to myself kind of makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm very comfortable to tell you all day I'm a piece of fucking shit, but that doesn't make me cry at all. But
Because that's your safety, Jessica. You are safe in the unsafe. We want to create safety in the unknown, right? And in order for us to do that, you must reinforce the decision to become successful. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. There's no safety. There's no possibility of safety in the unknown.
yeah.
This is where a therapeutic relationship can be really valuable, because I can tell you, I know for a fact there is safety in the unknown here. I've seen it 1,000 times with various people I've worked with. I know it's there. You don't know it's there. I mean, cognitively, I think you know it's there. At that soul level, I don't think you know it's there, because it's too scary. It's too scary to be that vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, we can have tremendous loss. And I think you have had that kind of loss in your life in various ways when you have been very vulnerable, largely when you were a kid, right? So the idea for the next week, and I say idea, not homework, because you can decide what you do with it, is interrupting reinforcement of the voice. And actually, in our very first meeting ever, we did an interview, and I was you shared your story with me, and
Which
you
is
said at one point,
which is on your socials, might I add, Strength Counselling Services.
that's right, that's right, and you mentioned that a therapist at one point said, lie to yourself. I'm not going to sit here and ask you to do that. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that we need to make small decisions and reinforce them so that it's not a lie. But you did say that the theory was effective for you to some degree, where you would tell yourself something, and if you told yourself enough, then it would become true. It's kind of like putting tokens in, and eventually that outweighs the negative tokens, and then we start to believe it, right? The thing I don't like about the lying piece is that I want to see you actually taking action, reinforcing, so it's true, rather than telling yourself something that could be true that's actually not true to you in the moment.
Yeah,
So you use that however you want to.
yeah, I guess the way that I was using that was for my appearance, like telling myself that I was attractive and that I was like beautiful, and it was a lie to me because I didn't believe it. But that's such like a subjective thing that eventually it could be true, because you know what I mean? Whereas I see the difference between, like, it's not a lie if I tell myself I am capable of doing this, even if it feels like a lie.
Yeah. So you can utilize that theory however you want to, but my theory that I'm asking you to consider is application and follow through, right? Your executive function, like I've said, there's nothing wrong with it that I can see. So you can make that decision and follow through. You're just too afraid. But in that deep-seated fear of pushing through that decision, you're living in addiction, because this is what you do.
Yeah.
Right? You stay there because that's comfortable.
Yeah.
Addiction and chaos is comfortable. So we want to start to break the cycle. And then eventually, the more that you come out of addiction further away and start making these healthier choices and following through, reinforcing them, the less likely you'll be attracted to chaotic partners, because you're healing that cycle. You see? Right? And now here's the thing too, is you'll be less attracted to the chaotic partners but the new partners won't be as boring. And it's like
Mm.
a gradient that it depends on
Oh.
how healthy you get to how boring
Yeah,
the
yeah.
healthy people will be, right?
That's
And
interesting.
all at the same time, I'm going to warn you right now, as you get well, you're going to miss the chaos,
Mm.
because addiction in its peak, I'll say this, is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people don't go into addiction because it sucks.
Yeah.
They go into addiction because it fucking is great, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And it's the downfall of addiction that's
Yeah.
not great, because we go too far too fast, and then we don't know how to get out of it because our brains are reliant now on the behavior or the substance or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So the as we go to close here, and we'll do a checkout in a second, but the encouragement today is to interrupt the voice.
Okay.
And I don't so much care like what you say to the voice. Like, you can just say stop, or you
Mm-hmm.
can say you're not right,
Mm-hmm.
or you can say I'm not listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not taking this into account right now. Or you can say, if you want to be really brave, you can say something like, my executive function is really good and you don't know me.
Mm.
You can actually say something that's positive about yourself.
Yeah.
So to get a token does not mean that you have to say something nice.
Mm-hmm.
It means right now at this level, it
Stop
means you
being the
just
mean.
interrupt the voice. Yeah.
So being nice to
Now,
myself is stop being mean. It makes sense. Checks out.
well, careful though, because it's not that easy, right?
Yeah.
It's not even that you're stopping being mean. You're just interrupting the thought.
Mm-hmm.
So you're still being mean. There's
Mm-hmm.
no way I can sit here and say to you, Jessica, stop being mean to
Yeah.
yourself and you're going to feel better.
Yeah.
It's not going to work like that, because you
Mm-hmm.
are so entrenched
Mm-hmm.
in being mean to yourself on a consistent basis that we're just wasting our time if you can expect yourself to just turn that around
Yeah.
overnight. We can't. It's like layers upon layers upon layers of
Mm-hmm.
self-hatred. And we take one layer off, but you're still being fucking mean to yourself.
Yeah.
You're just maybe being a little less mean to yourself. You know what I'm saying?
What
We're going to get
what
to down 10 layers.
what is that effect? Did you see that effect that just happened on your video?
No,
Maybe
I,
it
I,
should.
I have no self view. I can't see.
There was fireworks for some reason. You were making a breakthrough
Really?
and Zoom like that.
No, I didn't see it. That's so funny. Well, maybe symbolic. I don't know. But,
Yeah.
but yeah. So then when we get down through 10 layers of self-hatred, guess what? It'll be actually way easier to say something nice about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you are smart, or you are valuable, or something that's not aesthetically pleasing, like, appearance wise, but
Yeah.
something that has to do with your soul.
Mm-hmm.
Like you are a good person
Yeah.
or whatever,
My
right?
competency, I think, is like the thing that is hard for me. Like parents and stuff, that's all superficial. But like if I were to feel like a competent human, I feel like I would be one. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna stop that
Agree.
thought.
Right. And then you can follow it up with something else, or you can just interrupt the thought. So that's all I really want you to do this week.
Okay.
And if you can interrupt the thought, so say you're planning on, you need to brush your teeth, for example. This is the one we keep coming back to. And and that little, what I'm gonna say is that defiant little kid inside of you goes, fuck, I don't want to brush my teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can sit down for 15 minutes with yourself and have that conversation about both sides, like we've talked about today.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime the voice comes in, so this is twofold, you're going to have the conversation and the voice is going to come in, you're going to interrupt the voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like you're interrupting the voice coming in here, and then you're saying over here to that defiant side of yourself, you're saying, this is why it's valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I want to do it.
Yeah.
I can do it. Right. So that's all I want you to do this week, and
Okay.
see what happens. And if you want to get a jar for um, for tokens and to actually see this in real time, you can do that too. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to sit here and ask you to do anything right now.
Okay. That feels
So,
approachable.
yeah,
Like
good.
I
Oh, I
feel
like
like I
that.
can do that.
I like
Like it
that.
doesn't feel daunting.
Yeah, good. And there's no expectation here. Whether you do it or you don't do it, I don't care, right? I just want to see that you are willing to be open to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the first step. Sometimes people who are either therapists or clients of and they're like, "Oh, I'm not making any progress because I haven't done this big thing." And it's like, "Bullshit. This is progress."
Mm-hmm.
You feeling like this is approachable is progress because all I've done today is I have outlined things that you can do differently. And guess
Mm-hmm.
what you said? You said, yeah, I'm open to that.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't say, fuck, no,
Fuck
I'm not
you.
doing that.
Yeah.
Right? You said, I am open to that.
Mm-hmm.
You will have resistance to these things because you're stuck in that comfort of uncomfortability.
Mm-hmm.
You're stuck there. So until we can start seeing follow through and reinforcement, you're going to stay in that defiance place. We're not
Mm-hmm.
going to break through that right away, but you do have to follow through for us to break through it,
Mm-hmm.
to get away from it a little bit. And so that's for another day,
Yeah.
right? Right now, we're just interrupting the thoughts that are preventing you from the follow through.
Perfect. Yay. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
So I'm curious, as we go to close, I'm just like wondering, what was this like for you? And what'd you take away? What did you learn, if anything? What didn't go well for you? Just anything.
Yeah, I guess I'm because so long I've had in my head that I'm too nice to myself. It's just interesting how when I'm try to actually be nice to myself, I just like that makes me cry and like that makes me like not feel good. So I guess that's the
Mm-hmm.
part that's interesting to me is like I've felt like the means part of me always says the reason that I can't do any of these things is because I'm not capable of doing it. But just realizing it's because I'm telling myself that is like makes it so much more approachable and digestible because I'm like, well, not that it's easy to fucking retrain and rewire my entire self talk, but it's a lot, feels a lot more overwhelming than having to like build my executive function from scratch. So that has really been helpful is thinking about how that's the part that's really interrupting me is me just saying like you can't do that properly. And if I just get over that part, then I can do things. Which like
Absolutely.
I don't know why that would be so hard for me to figure out. Obviously, I'm my biggest obstacle, but I've viewed it before as if there's like all these factors that need to like align in the universe for me to be able to do these things. But working on self-esteem will make all of that so much easier and not it makes it not feel as overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. A big part of this, what you just said, like having all these factors that you need to consider and all these things, I think that comes from your trauma around misdiagnosis
Mm, interesting.
because there's so many moving parts. And then half the time, it wasn't even true
Mm-hmm.
what they were telling you, right? So you're sitting here thinking, oh, I have all these huge things that I have to overcome when really that's not the case.
Yeah, that is definitely interesting because I've learned so many times that everything was told and believed is a lie. So as I'm gathering
Mm-hmm.
information, it's like, how do I ever know what's real and right, what's true? Like I feel it's hard for me to trust, obviously my decision making, but everything, like any information that I receive, I'm like, because for so long, and I mean that's also like growing up too, and like like growing up with a parent who's an alcoholic who's like, no, I'm not drunk, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But that's interesting, me not being able to like trust information like that and feeling like there's all these.
Yeah. So, so all food for thought. Something I am going to ask you next time we meet is for examples
Mm-hmm. Okay.
of how you interrupted the thought or what you did about it. I'm also going to ask if there was any movement in you doing things that you maybe didn't want to do. And
Okay.
there may not be. Let's not expect that. Let's have no judgment and no expectations on any of it. But I am going to ask you for some examples. So you can write them down if you think you might not remember them, or you can just try and remember them. But that me having examples week to week is going to be vital to what I ask you to do next. So
Okay.
I will ask that of you. Okay. So how you manage that is entirely up to you.
Amazing. Yay.
Good.
Thank you
All
so
right. All
much.
right. Oh, you're welcome. This was lovely. And I'm glad we got to some core explanations
Yes.
of what's happening for you. And I think we'll just build upon that along the way. And we're going to start seeing more and more examples of that showing up. And the fact that there was some emotion today is really great, because it means that you're not shut down to these parts that really need to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're open to that. It's just really scary.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you build that therapeutic connection with me, you can walk with me through those scary parts as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to having to do it by yourself. And then it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah.
But I think the therapeutic connection that you and I have needs to be built up quite a bit more, because that part doesn't trust anybody, not
Mm-hmm.
even you. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yay. Well, I'm
Yeah.
excited for our next
Cool.
session.